Lord, we just thank you for this time that we have to come together and learn about you and to have iron sharpen iron so that we can understand and know what your word is and rightly discern your word. Lord, I just thank you that you have given us prophecies that we can dig into and that we can know. And Lord, I just pray right now that you would open the hearts or the eyes of our understanding, that we can see things that we haven't seen before, that we will have ears to hear, and that we would be able to be blessed by studying these prophecies. And we just give you all the glory and all the praise in Jesus' name. Okay, so tonight we're digging into prophecy and the end times. So before we go too far, we're going to say right off the bat, we know prophecy is subject to interpretation until it is fulfilled. Okay, so for 4,000 years, people looked for the promised Messiah. For 400 years, rabbis studied Jeremiah and Isaiah and Ezekiel, Daniel, all the minor prophets, anticipating the coming of the Messiah and his kingdom. The only issue is that they were focused on the glorious King, and they missed the Messiah that came as a babe born in Bethlehem. Remember when the people shouted, "Crucify him"? It was because they were longing for the king that would rescue them from Rome, and they didn't recognize the one of Isaiah 53 who would rescue them of their sins. So even though Jesus was fulfilling in front of them every prophecy in Isaiah 53, they couldn't recognize it. So both prophecies, the prophecy of the smitten Lord and the glorious King, are true. There's scriptures for both. But because it's prophecy, the order that Jesus came in was not according to their expectation. So they missed it. Okay, so we have to know that he came first time as a babe in a manger and as a smitten Lord. Next time he's coming onto earth. It's going to be as a glorious King. But when we look at prophecy, we can only interpret the prophecy based on what we know, based on what we understand. You know, even what they saw is based on what they understood at the time. In Zechariah 5, he talks about something that looked like a flying scroll that was 30 feet by 15 feet. And it flew over the earth and pronounced curses on the thieves. Well, if we look at the description, could it have been a satellite? A modern satellite that flies over the earth and is transmitting things into the homes, because it said in every home is transmitted to every home. Well, we think of it as a satellite, but they didn't have any word for that. So they call it a flying scroll. So based on what the prophets saw and understood, you know, even in Revelation, John said something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. If we were to look at that, what would look like a great mountain burning with fire? Could it have been an asteroid, a meteor going into the sea? But they didn't have the words for that. They didn't have the knowledge. And so prophecy has to be interpreted based on what the prophet understood at the time, what we understand at the time, and then pray it out based on Holy Spirit. Because we have to use them based on our knowledge and insight, but always keep our minds and hearts open to new revelation and prophecy being fulfilled in ways that we aren't expecting. That's not only the prophecies of the Scripture, but the prophecies that we get now. We have to be willing to accept the fact that they come to pass in unexpected ways. Okay? So, when I go over some of the basics, prophecies regarding Jesus' return are scattered throughout the Scriptures, okay, all the way through. But the three main books are pertaining to end times are Daniel, Ezekiel, and Revelation. Okay? And we're not going to go through all three books, but we're going to touch on several of them. So growing up in the church, we often heard about the rapture. Now, if you look up the word rapture in the Bible, you will not find it. It does not appear in scriptures. Okay, it comes from the Latin word raptus, which means to seize or transport. So the church adopted it to refer to the second coming because the believers are seized or transported off the earth. The Bible calls this thing the blessed hope. Okay, so if you're looking for the word rapture, you won't find it. But there are several places when the disciples asked when Jesus was going to come as this glorious king. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all recorded similar passages. But if you look in Acts 1, the final recorded question the disciples ever asked Jesus before his ascension, before he left earth, was, Lord, will you at this time restore the kingdom of Israel? So even the very last question they were asking was, are you the glorious king now? And Jesus said, it's not for you to know the times or seasons which the Father has put in his own authority. So we don't always know these times or seasons, but we can understand what we're to watch for. Okay? Make sense so far? Okay. Matthew 24 gives a lot of things to watch for. I'm going to read this passage, Matthew 24, verses 3 through 14. It says, now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? If you understand their question, they're asking, when are you going to come back? So the disciples knew that he was going to come back again, even when he was on the earth. He says, what's these signs? And Jesus answered and said to them, take heed that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in various places. All these things are the beginning of sorrow. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. There'll be many false prophets that will rise up and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations. And then the end will come. So all through history, we've heard of all these things. In fact, now how many times on the news do we hear about lawlessness abounding and people being offended and the love of many growing cold? But it just says all these things are the beginnings of sorrows, and then the end will come. Okay? So those are the signs that we watch for, but this is not the tribulation. Okay, on earth, there'll be a great time in the scriptures called the Great Tribulation. So there's tribulations, and then there's the Great Tribulations. And we'll talk about the Great Tribulation here in a little bit. But there's a great debate whether the rapture will happen before the Great Tribulation, which you will hear called pre-tribulation or pre-trib. Okay? I'm not going to go through the scriptures for each one. If you believe that the rapture is going to happen in mid-trib, middle of the trib, or post-trib, after the tribulation, there is scriptures and arguments to support every one of them. Again, it's prophecy. So watch and pray. Be ready. But be working for the kingdom. I mean, that's our job. Okay? So, but you'll hear, are you mid-trib, pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib? You know, I'm hoping pre-trib because I don't want to go through it, but I'm just kingdom. Okay? We do know that Jesus is returning in bodily form. We do know that. In Acts, we're going to go through some scriptures right quick. In Acts 1:9, it says, when he had spoken these things, while they watched him, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. And while they looked steadfastly toward heaven as he went up, behold, two men stood by them in white apparel, who also said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand gazing up into heaven? The same Jesus who was taken up from you into heaven will so come in like manner as you saw him go into heaven. So we know, how was he taken up? He was, while they watched him, he was taken and a cloud received him out of their sight. And that's how it's going to happen. Where he's going to appear and we're going to see him. Same manner. So when Father says it's time, Jesus will return to retrieve his bride. Now, when, what we call the rapture, he will not step foot on the earth at that time. Because at that time, believers who are watching for him and living for him will meet him in the clouds. We will be caught up in the skies. This is our blessed hope. Matthew 24, verse 30 says, "Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds and from one end of heaven to the other." In Mark 13, verse 27, "He will send his angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from farthest part of the earth to the farthest part of heaven." I always thought that was interesting. Okay. I'll go there. That's a rabbit trail. Luke 21, verse 27. "Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now when these things begin to happen, look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draweth nigh." Titus 2:13. "Looking for the blessed hope and glorious appearing of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ." 1 Corinthians 15. "But we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet." And then 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 16 through 17 says, "For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will by no means precede those who are asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and thus we shall always be with the Lord." This is when you hear, the dead, or the people who are asleep, the dead in Christ, they're going to come out of the graves. And then we who are on the earth will meet them in the air. So no one except the Father knows the time and day that this will happen. Okay? Matthew 24, verse 36. "But in that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only." And then he says, "But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be." Verse 40, "Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and the other left. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming." So we need to watch. We need to pray. We need to be ready. Okay, because we don't know. And whether you're pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, it doesn't matter. We still don't know the hour when the rapture is going to happen. Or what we call the rapture. That great being taken away. But we do know, again, this is all subject to interpretation, but everyone agrees that there will be a great tribulation. Okay? Most agree, based on the scriptures, that there will be 3.5 years at the beginning when it's not too bad. That the last 3.5 years are going to be horrible. Okay? And these will be times like none other. If we remember in Paul's day, Nero was the emperor. And in that time, that he was crucifying the Christians. He was feeding them to the wild animals for sport. He was hanging them and putting them and lighting them like torches for his parties. I mean, it was like horrible stuff. And Paul told them, the Thessalonians, they said, this isn't the Great Tribulation. I mean, what could be worse than all that? And yet Paul said that's not the Great Tribulation. So even all that Hitler did in World War II, it will not compare to the Great Tribulation. That's why back in my day, we were scared to death of being left. We wanted pre-trib. We wanted to be out of here. We didn't want anything to do with this. Okay, but we know that God gives grace what we have to do. But I still believe pre-trib. But that's just me. Okay. Anyway, but Paul did say these signs he gave the Thessalonians these signs to determine that if we're in the Great Tribulation. He said in 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 3 and 4, well, basically all of 2 Thessalonians 2. But 3 and 4 says, "Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first. And the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." So Paul said, unless you see a great falling away, and unless you see the Antichrist being worshipped in all the earth, we're not there yet. Okay? So, and even with all the stuff that's going on now, even with the things that we're seeing in the earth and we're thinking, how much worse? We're not there yet. Okay? So that's why we just have a basic knowledge. It's important for us to have a working knowledge of it, but we continue to live kingdom and do our business kingdom. Okay? We don't live in fear at all because we know that we have a great God and a great Redeemer. So, we're going to walk through some of what is going to be in the Great Tribulation. Let's start like Revelation 5. And we're going to, some of this is like before, during, and after the Great Revelation. But one thing that we've heard this before in songs, if you've been around Spirit of Life at all, it says, Revelation 5 verse 1, "And I, John, saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. Then I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, 'Who is worthy to open the scroll and to loose its seals?' And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look at it. So I wept much, because no one was found worthy to open and read the scroll or to look at it. But one of the elders said to me, 'Do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its 7 seals.'" So Jesus has the authority because of what he went through, he prevailed. He has authority to open these scrolls under the direction of the Father. Verse 7 says, "Then Jesus came and took the scroll out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne." So, we have 7 seals that are about to be opened. And each seal, something happens. And we're going to kind of go quickly through these. And it starts at Revelation 6 verse 1, if you want to follow along in Revelation, or if you want to read it for yourself. It's always interesting to read them. So the first seal is opened, and there was a white horse. And he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. The second seal went out. It was a fiery red horse, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people would kill one another, and there was given to him a great sword. The third seal, it was a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine." So there was a scarcity, like a famine, a scarcity in the land. Verse 4 was a pale horse. And the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And power was given over to them over 1/4 of the earth, to kill with the sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. So 1/4 of the earth of humans were killed. Verse 5, the seal 5. This is the 5th seal. This is, John saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and the testimony which they held. And they cried out, "How long, O Lord? How long?" And a white robe was given to them. And they said, "Just rest a little bit longer. It's not time yet." Then there was a sixth seal. And there was a great earthquake. And the sun became black as sackcloth of hair. And the moon became like blood. And the stars of the heavens fell to the earth. Then the sky receded like a scroll when it was rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. And this, the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders, the mighty men, every slave and every free man hid themselves in the caves and the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne." And I thought that was interesting, because if you think even now, There's news story after news story about all these elites, the wealthy and the rich men who are building themselves bunkers in all these mountains. And even here in the scriptures, 2,000 years ago, they're saying they're going to run to them and it's not going to help them. So then in Revelation 7, between the sixth and the seventh seal, there was a pause. And 4 angels were set up at the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds back. And they said, "Now stop, don't harm anything right now until we can seal the ones who are God's servants." And so the angel went through the earth and they sealed God's servants. And this is where you got the 144,000. There's 12,000 from each tribe. This is right here between the 6th and the 7th seal. And then he saw the great multitudes, the numbers of standing before the throne, seeing salvation belongs to our Lord. Okay? And then the 7th seal. And there was silence in heaven for half an hour. It's the only time silence is recorded in heaven. And then 7 angels who stand before God were given 7 trumpets. And then another angel was given a lot of incense, and he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the altar. And the smoke of the incense and the prayers of the saints ascended before God from the angel's hands. And then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it to earth. And there was noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. So the prayers of the saints caused the thunders, lightnings, and earthquakes. So then you have the 7 angels who were set up at the 7th seal with the trumpets. You have the 7 trumpets. So the first one sounded, and hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth, and 1/3 of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. Okay? So you'll see in there's a lot of thirds. So this one's 1/3 of the trees were burned up. The second trumpet sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and 1/3 of the sea became blood. And 1/3 of the living creatures of the sea died, and 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. The third trumpet, a great star fell from heaven, and it fell on 1/3 of the rivers and the springs. And the name of the star was Wormwood. And 1/3 of the waters became this bitterness, and people died because of the bitterness of the water. The fourth trumpet, the sun was struck, and 1/3 of the sun was struck, 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of the stars, so that 1/3 of them were darkened, 1/3 of the day did not shine, and 1/3 of the night. So you see a lot of thirds right here. Okay, and then there's another pause, and then there was an angel that went flying through heaven saying, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth." And the 3 remaining trumpets are now called woes. Okay? So the 5th trumpet, or the first woe, was a star fallen from heaven to the earth. And to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. And he opened the pit, and smoke rose out of the pit. And the sun and the air was darkened because of the smoke. So everything turned dark. And out of the smoke, locusts came upon the earth. And the power was given them like the scorpions of the earth. They were commanded not to harm the grass or any of the green things, but only men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And they were given authority. They couldn't kill them, but they tormented them for 5 months. And the men tried to die, and they couldn't. They couldn't die because of the scorpions. And if you look in that passage about the scorpions, it is really interesting. The way they describe them is almost like helicopters, but not quite. It's kind of interesting. I've often looked at that thinking, are these actual beings, or are they like helicopters that they thought were, and I thought it was interesting. Anyway, so there's a lot more that we're not covering. So it'd be interesting to just go back and look. Okay, and the sixth trumpet, they released 4 angels who were bound at the great river Euphrates. And these 4 angels who had been prepared for the hour and the day and the month and the year were released to kill a third of mankind. And they killed the third of mankind by 3 plagues: the fire, the smoke, and the brimstone that came out of their mouths. So here, remember before, in part of the seals, a fourth of mankind had died. Now they killed another third of mankind. And then and then between the sixth and the seventh trumpet, I got ahead of myself. This is another one of these songs that we hear. But the angel that was clothed with a cloud, with a rainbow around his head, and the face like sun, and his feet like the pillars of fire, came and stood with the right foot on the sea and the left foot on the land. And he cried out, and the 7 thunders uttered, and John had to seal up what the 7 thunders shouted. That the angel raised his right hand toward heaven and swore by him who lives forever, no more delay. And that was between the 6th and the 7th trumpet. Also during this time, there were 2 witnesses that came, and they prophesied 1,260 days. They were clothed in sackcloth. Some people think that this is Elijah and Enoch, because of the 2 people in the scriptures that did not die in the scriptures. I'm not convinced, but that's what a lot of the scholars say. Okay, but it actually says in Revelation that these are the 2 olive trees in Zechariah. Okay, but they had fire that came out. So when somebody came against them, if the enemy tried to kill them, they had fire that would come out of their mouth and burn up the people. They had power to withdraw the rain. They had power over the waters to turn it into blood. And they had power to strike the earth with plagues anytime they wanted to, during their allotted time. But after those 1,260 days, the Antichrist killed them. And they laid in the street, their dead bodies laid in the street for 3.5 days. At the end of the 3.5 days, they get up like nothing ever happened, rise from the dead, and they ascend in heaven in a cloud. Okay? So, that's between the 6th and the 7th trumpet. The 7th trumpet sounded, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, "The kingdoms of the world have become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever." So the last trumpet is calling the kingdoms, we are now the kingdom of the Lord, forever and ever. So, and I'm not going to go on right here where in Revelations you can read about it. They talk about the great signs in heaven. They talk about a lot of, basically it's the heaven side of Jesus' birth and how Satan was cast out of heaven. But like I said, you can go back and read that yourself. But Revelation 13 introduces the beast, or who most of us would call Antichrist. Most people know him as the Antichrist. And the false prophet. So these 2 are given powers for 3.5 years. Okay? The dragon gave the Antichrist his power, throne, and authority. People worshipped the dragon. There's some other things I wanted to bring out about this. Okay, they worshipped the dragon and they worshipped the beast. One of his heads, it was like sometime during this period, the Antichrist is mortally wounded with a sword, and yet he is healed, miraculously, quote unquote, healed. And so then all the people marveled, and that's when they started following the beast, and they worshipped him. And it was granted, and this is Revelation 13, verse 7, it was granted to the Antichrist, to the beast, to make war with the saints and to overcome them. Okay? So at that time, even at this time, it was granted to him the power to overcome the saints. And authority was given to him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. So then, after, with the Antichrist, there was another beast that came out that was who we call the false prophet. Okay? And he basically had all the authority of the first beast when he was with the beast. And he caused all the people to worship the Antichrist or be killed. He was the one, he performed great signs that, like even making fire come down from heaven, and he deceived all of them with the signs and wonders. So he was a prophet of the beast. Okay, and then he was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast would speak. And so he had a lot of authority, a lot of power here. But he also caused all, both great, rich, poor, free, and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. And this it says, here is wisdom, let he who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of man, his number is 666. This is where we get the ooey number 666. Okay? But if you see that, he had either a mark, the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Okay? A lot of people I've heard say that this vaccination that they're trying to give us is the mark of the beast because you can't buy or sell without it. That's not the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast will be known. You have to worship the beast and take his mark. So whoever's taking the mark will know when they are taking the mark of the beast. It's not just oops, I made a mistake. Okay? So don't worry about it. Don't think that you're going to take it by mistake. You will, it will be a choice. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's the beast and his false prophet. About that time in Revelation, they have 3 angels flying through heaven again and proclaiming. They're proclaiming the everlasting gospel that's preached to those on earth. They're proclaiming that Babylon has fallen. And they're proclaiming that anyone who worships the beast or receives his mark will be tormented forever. There's also 2 harvests that are being reaped right now or during this time. The earth's harvest, which you hear Jesus in a lot of his parables will say, at that time I'll send my angels and they will gather in the harvest. So it's the earth's harvest, it's people. And then the grapes of wrath. And these grapes of wrath, it's the vine of the earth, and it's thrown into the wine press of God's wrath. So these 2 harvests are talked about in Revelation 2. So then after that, 7 angels come out of the temple with 7 golden bowls, and these are the wrath of God. So we think the seals are bad, the trumpets are bad, but this is the wrath of God. Okay? And the first one poured out his bowl on the earth, and foul and loathsome sores came on the men who had the mark of the beast and worshipped his image. So those who didn't have the mark didn't get the sores. Okay? The second bowl was poured out on the sea, and it became blood as a dead man, and every living creature in the sea died. So before 1/3 of the sea creatures died, now everything in the sea died. Now, as we go on, in the new heaven and the earth, he'll say there's no more sea. So everything in the sea died. Bowl 3. Bowl 3. The angel poured out on all the rivers and springs, and they became blood. And then the angel of the water said, you are righteous, O Lord, because you judge these things, for they have shed the bloods of the saints and the prophets, and you have given them blood to drink, for it is their just due. So when you start looking at these wraths of God, you can see where there's judgments based on this. This is God's judgments. The fourth bowl, the sun poured his bowl on the sun, and the power was given to him to scorch men with fire. So at that time, there was no more protection. Men were scorched by the sun. The fifth bowl poured out his bowl on the throne of the beast, and his kingdom became full of darkness, and they gnawed their tongues because of the pain. The sixth bowl was on the great river Euphrates, and his waters dried up, so that the way of the kings from the east might be prepared. And they gathered together in the place in Hebrew called Armageddon. So when you hear about the Battle of Armageddon, this is where they start gathering up. And if you look, God's wrath gave them a path to this battle. And the seventh bowl, the angel poured his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne saying, "It is done." And there was noises and thunderings and lightnings. There was a great earthquake, such a mighty and great earthquake as had not occurred since men on the earth. Now the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And then every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. In other words, flat earth happened here. Okay. And the great hail from heaven fell upon men. Each hailstone was about the weight of a talent. And it says, and men blasphemed God because of the plague of that hail, since the plague was exceedingly great. Okay. So that was the 7 bowls. And then the Revelation talks about the fall of Babylon. It talks about Jesus coming with the armies of heaven, and they defeat the beast and his armies. The beast and the false prophet are cast alive into the lake of fire, burning with brimstone. That's the last you hear about the beast and his false prophet. Okay? But they're cast alive into the lake of fire. But the dragon, that serpent of old, the devil and Satan, this one that we call Satan, was bound 1,000 years in the bottomless pit. So he was, in fact it says one angel came and bound him with chains and threw him into the bottomless pit. So he's not that strong. But at that point, while Satan is bound for 1,000 years, Jesus will rule the earth. Okay, this is the time when we talk about the lion laying down with the lamb. This is the time of, the great paradise time. People will still live. They'll still die. They'll still marry. They'll still have children. The scriptures say that the person 100 years old is still considered a child. Okay? People during this time will still have a choice whether to become believers or not. This is a time when we rule with Christ, and the teachers teach how to be believers, and people will choose whether to be or not to be. And they can still live for Satan. Satan still is bound, but there'll still be people who worship him and still believe that he will come out victorious, even though we know he won't. So, at the end of this 1,000 years, it says Satan is let loose again for a short time. It doesn't say how short that time is. God's short time is different than our short time. So, it could be for another 2,000 years. We don't know. Okay? But for another short time. But during that time, he sets up an army that comes against Jerusalem. And Revelation says that fire comes down and devours the army. But Satan is captured. And he is cast into the lake of fire to be tormented day and night forever. So after the 1,000 years and Satan is loosed, and he tries again to defeat God again, like he hasn't learned his lesson however many times before, then he is cast into the lake of fire. Oops, I missed one. Well, that's just what I was just talking about. So during this millennium reign, that's when we will rule and reign. This is the kingdom. This is what we're coming into, this kingdom reign. Okay? And then there'll be a great white throne judgment. That's when all the people who ever walked on the earth will stand before God and give account of their lives. According to their works, it says, anyone whose name is not found in the book of life is thrown into the lake of fire. Okay? So it's quite clear. Have your name in the book of life. Okay? And then we get to, that's a great white throne judgment. So the books are open, yeah. And it says more than one book, okay? When you start looking at the great white throne judgment, it says, and the books were open. Books, plural. And people are judged according to their works. And then it says, and the book of life is also opened, which I thought was very interesting. So there's more than one book. There's the book of life for the believers, and then there's books for others. And you think, well, why are they judged according, if they're not believers, they're going to be thrown into the lake of fire. Why are they even judged? There is a book that is one of the Apocrypha. It's called the Revelation of Peter, where just like John went to heaven and saw heaven, Peter went to hell and saw hell, and there's different levels, and that people were judged, and so they were in hell based on their works. So everybody was judged based on works, whether believers or unbelievers. Now, like I said, that's not part of the 66 books of the Bible, so you could take it or leave it, but that's part of it. Okay, so then we have the New Jerusalem, where all things are made new. Revelation 21. Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also, there was no more sea. There's that no more sea. Okay. Verse 2. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death, no more sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. Then he who sat on the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. So this, in chapter 21 and 22 of Revelation, it gives very detailed descriptions of heaven. And this is the new heaven. This is the heaven that we will have for eternity. The new earth. This is the new earth that we will rule and reign on. It says all things are going to be burned up. Okay, and then we have the new, where we will rule and reign with him. And that was when everybody will serve God. And he'll be our God. There'll be no more sun, because God is our sun. Okay? So, I love reading 21 and 22. So you want to go back and read those, because it gives a wonderful description. But our job, it says, Behold, Jesus says, Behold, I'm coming quickly. But our job is always be ready. Okay? Our job is not to live in fear. I mean, as a kid, I had dreams of missing the rapture and, and all this stuff, because we grew up in fear. But this is not a fearful thing. This is a blessed thing. This is saying God is going to judge. He's always told us he's going to judge, and he will judge. But he's already judged us. We've already died. Those of us who are believers, we already died. And so our job is to focus on our callings and assignments. Our job is to know these prophecies, because it says, Blessed is he who keeps the word of the prophecy of this book. It talks about you're blessed if you read it. You're blessed if you studied it. So we're blessed by even having this class tonight, because that's what the scripture says. But we're not to dwell in this time. This is the time that God can take care of. We're to know the times and the seasons, but we are to further the kingdom and bring glory to our God at all times. So, as my dad always said, just, live like Jesus could come back at any second, but also plan like he's not coming back for another 100 years. So that's kind of the way we have to do it. We have to plan like he's not coming back for another, this is 5782, I think, in the Jewish year. And So it's still another couple of 100 years before even the 6,000 mark. So who's to know? The Father knows. And so all we have to do is trust Him and focus on our callings and assignments. Amen? I got through it, 45 minutes. Okay, so any questions or comments? Now remember, this is all prophecy. So always base it on what our expectation is may not happen. People have studied this for 2,000 years now. And some of it they'll get right. Some of it not so much. So, so this is prophecy. Okay? Any comments, any questions, We got it going. Okay.